The locksmith was still in my driveway when my phone lit up with my sister's name, and I almost didn't answer because I wanted 10 more minutes of quiet before the rest of my life started. I had closed on the cabin 8 days earlier, 2 acres on the edge of Coeur d'Alene, a stretch of lake you could see from the kitchen window if you leaned a little to the left, and a price tag that had taken me 11 years to make real. I'm an estate attorney. I spend my whole working life cleaning up the messes people leave when they don't put things in writing, when they assume blood means honor, when they trust a handshake to a person who has never once kept their word. You'd think I would have seen what was coming. I think part of me did. I think that's why on day 3, before the boxes were even unpacked, I'd called a locksmith and had every lock on the property changed and a small camera mounted over the front door, angled down at the porch. I told myself it was just good practice for a single woman living alone on a quiet road. That was half of it. The other half had my sister's voice in it. So when she called, I let it ring twice, set my coffee down on the counter I'd wiped clean that morning, and picked up. "You're up," she said, like she'd caught me. There was road noise behind her, the particular hum of a car doing 70 on a highway. "Good. I need you to do something for me before we get there." "Before who gets where?" "Don't be like that. We're coming up. The whole family. We left Spokane 40 minutes ago, so you've got, what, an hour and a half? Maybe 2. We'll be there before dinner." I stood very still. I could hear my own pulse. Who is we? Everybody. Me, the kids, the husband. Mum and Dad are driving separate. Our brother and his wife, and they're 3. The cousins are caravanning down from the other direction. Aunt on Dad's side is bringing her too. It's 22 of us, give or take. I told everyone you'd finally have room for all of us, so... She said it like a gift she was handing me. We're staying 2 weeks. The kids are off school. I want to be honest about what happened inside my body in that moment, because the people who watch these things always ask why we don't just scream. I didn't scream. My chest got tight and hot, and my hand went a little numb around the phone, and the first clear thought I had was not anger. It was an old, tired ache, the one I'd carried since I was 9 years old, and learned that in our family there was a person things happened to, and a person things happened for, and I was the first kind. "You're telling me, not asking me," I said. Oh my God, here we go. I could picture her rolling her eyes. "It's a vacation, not a hostage situation. Clear out the bedrooms. The kids can't sleep on floors. They have allergies. And figure out food for everyone tonight. Nothing fancy. The aunt's gluten-free now, by the way. And Mum wants the room with the lake view. You know how she gets about her hip." There was a time, a long time, when I would have said yes. When I would have hung up and driven to the grocery store and spent $400, I just told myself I couldn't spare and made up the beds and given my mother the good room and slept on my own couch in my own house for 2 weeks, while 22 people I was related to treated the place I bled for like a free resort with a maid they didn't have to tip. I knew that woman intimately. I'd been her at every holiday, every funeral, every small favor that turned into a season of my life. "How did you get the address?" I asked. A pause. The smallest hitch in the road noise of her voice. Mom had it. Mom didn't have it. Mom didn't have it. I never gave it to her. Does it matter? We found it, and there it was, the thing underneath everything. The flat little entitlement that had run through my entire childhood like a current under ice. We found you. You don't get to be unfound. "It matters to me," I said. "But we can talk about it when you get here." That softened her because she heard it as a yes. She always heard accommodation as the natural state of the world reasserting itself. Good. See? Was that so hard? "Get the rooms ready." "Love you, gotta drive." She hung up. I set the phone down on the clean counter and looked out the window at the lake, at the light coming off it in that flat silver way it does in late afternoon, and I felt the old woman in me rise up and start making lists. Sheets, towels. How many can I feed with what's in the fridge? Where will Dad park? The reflex was so deep it was practically muscle. And then I did something I had never done before in 31 years. I let her finish her speech, and then I sat down at my own table, and I asked myself a single question I had never once allowed myself to ask. What do I actually want to happen here? The answer came so fast and so clean it scared me. I wanted them not to come in. That was all. Not a fight, not a lecture, not a scene I'd replay for the next decade. I just wanted to stand in my own doorway and have it be mine. People in the comments on stories like this always say the same thing, and they're right, and I want to say it before they do. The time to stop something is before it starts. So that's what I decided to do. Not after. Before. I had an hour and a half. I'm a person who works in hours and minutes, in deadlines and filings, so I use them. The first call I made was to my friend who runs the title and escrow office, 2 towns over, the one who'd walked me through closing. I asked her a single question and she laughed, not unkindly, and told me exactly what I already knew but needed to hear out loud from someone else. It was my house. The deed was recorded in my name and my name only. No one else had any legal interest in it, any tenancy, any claim. A guest I had not invited had no right to be there, and a guest I asked to leave, who refused, became a trespasser, and trespassers were a thing the county sheriff handled. "You want me to text you the non-emergency line?" she asked. I said yes. The second call was to the sheriff's non-emergency line itself. I want people to understand you can do this. You do not have to wait for the door to be broken down. I told the deputy who answered calmly that I was the sole owner of a property, that a large group of relatives had informed me they were arriving uninvited within 2 hours and intended to occupy my home for 2 weeks against my stated wishes, and that I anticipated they would not leave when asked. I told him I wanted to be on record before anything happened, and I asked what my options were. He was kind. He'd heard it before. More times than you'd think, he said. He told me that if I refused them entry and they wouldn't go, I could call back, and the unit would come and trespass them off the property, and that being family didn't change a single word of that. He made a note with my name and address and a timestamp. That note, that one boring administrative note, was worth more than every clever speech I'd ever rehearsed in the shower. The third thing I did was not a call. I went out to my car and I drove the 11 minutes into town, and I bought groceries, but not for 22 people. I bought enough for one. A nice steak, a good bottle of wine, the kind of bread I like. I bought it deliberately, looking each item in the eye, because I needed to do one ordinary loving thing for the one person in my family who had spent 3 decades waiting in line behind everyone else, and that person was me. Then I drove home, put the wine in the fridge, and changed into clothes I felt strong in. Then I waited on my own porch, in my own chair, with my own lake going silver in front of me, and I watched the road. They came in a string, the way I knew they would. My sister's minivan first, then my brother's SUV, then a sedan I didn't recognize, then another, headlights on in the gathering dusk, a little convoy of people who'd decided where I lived was a place they were entitled to be. They pulled onto the gravel and the doors started opening before the engines were even off. And out spilled the children and the coolers and the rolling suitcases, the suitcases especially, those packed for 2 weeks suitcases that told me everything about how sure they'd been. My sister got out first and started toward the porch with her arms half open and a smile that was really a command. "There she is. Okay, everybody, grab a bag, the kid's in the back first." "Stop," I said. Not loud. I'd learned long ago that loud is what they expect and what they're built to talk over. I said it the way you'd say it to a dog about to step into the road. It landed. She stopped. The whole moving mass of them slowed, suitcases pausing mid-roll on the gravel. 20-some faces turned toward the porch where I sat, and I stood up slowly so they'd see I wasn't coming down to meet them. I was holding the high ground, and I knew it, and I meant for them to know it too. "You're not staying here," I said. For a second, nobody understood the words. They genuinely didn't compute. My mother, climbing out of the second car, called out, "Honey, we drove 4 hours. Let's get inside, my hip. You're not coming inside." I let it sit. "Any of you. This is my home. I didn't invite you. I'm not hosting 22 people for 2 weeks in a house I closed on 8 days ago." The answer is no. My sister recovered first, the way she always did, with that laugh that was really a weapon. "Don't be ridiculous. It's freezing out here and the kids are exhausted." We'll talk inside. She put a foot on the bottom step. If you come up these stairs, I said, I'm going to call the sheriff, and I'm going to tell him exactly what I told him an hour ago when I put us all on record. You're going to want to take your foot off my step. That was the moment it turned, not into an apology. I want to be clear. Nobody in my family has ever apologized to me. And nobody did that night. It turned into something uglier and more familiar, which was the full machinery of guilt cranking up all at once because that machine was the only tool they had ever needed, and they could not believe it had stopped working. My mother started to cry, the practiced kind, the kind that had ended 100 arguments in my favour of them childhood. After everything I did for you, to treat your own mother like a criminal on her doorstep. My brother, who I genuinely cannot remember calling me on a birthday in a decade, got loud. You think you're better than us now? Big Lake House. You forget where you came from real fast. My sister-in-law, holding a baby I'd never met, said the thing that I think she thought was the kill shot. What kind of person does this to family? And here is the part I want to tell carefully, because the old me would have crumpled right here. This was always the spot where I broke. The crying mother, the angry brother, the baby held up like evidence. Some part of me. The 9-year-old, the line waiter, felt the floor tilt toward them. I felt the apology forming in my throat, the way it had 10,000 times. I'm sorry, of course. Come in, I'll figure it out. I didn't say it. I held on to the porch rail and I let the wave go past me instead of through me, and I found on the other side of it there was just quiet. The lake, my house behind me, a self I'd never met standing in my own doorway. The kind of person who finally read the deed, I said. My sister tried one more angle, lowering her voice to the reasonable register she used when the loud one failed. Okay, we don't all have to stay, but it's late, it's a long drive back. Just let the kids and the grandparents sleep here tonight, and the rest of us will figure something out. One night. You can't say no to one night. It was a good move. It was the move designed for me specifically, because one night was how every 2-week stay of my entire life had begun. One night was the wedge, and I knew if I said yes to one night, I'd wake up to 22 people and coffee made wrong in my kitchen, and my no would be gone forever, dissolved in the warm acid of family the way it always had been. No, I said. Not one night. Not the kids, not the grandparents, not you. There's a Holiday Inn Express off the highway in Post Falls, 20 minutes back the way you came. There's a Hampton near it. If everybody chips in, it's nothing, and you all clearly planned a budget for 2 weeks of free, so you can afford one night of paid. I'd start calling now before they fill up. That broke something. My brother came up 2 steps fast, close enough that I could smell the energy drink on him, and he said something I won't repeat. And I took my phone out of my pocket. I'd had the number up the whole time. My thumb just had to move once. And I said loud enough for all of them, I'm calling now. I dialed. The deputy answered. I gave my name and my address, and I said, it's the situation I called about earlier. They're here and they won't leave. Can you send someone? He said a unit was 8 minutes out. I said thank you. I hung up, and I looked at my brother on the steps and I said, 8 minutes. You have never seen people move like my family moved in those 8 minutes. Suddenly, it was all hustle and slammed doors, and the children herded back into cars, and the callers reloaded, and my mother's hip apparently healed, and my sister, the last one, stood at the bottom of the steps and looked up at me with an expression I'd never seen on her before, because I'd never given her a reason to make it. She looked at me like she didn't know me, and the thing is, she didn't. She'd known the other one, the line waiter. She'd never met this one. You're going to regret this, she said, when you need us. I've needed you my whole life, I said, and it came out steadier than I expected. You weren't there, so I learned to do it myself. That's the only reason there's a house here for you to be furious you can't sleep in. I built it without you. I get to keep it without you too. The sheriff's truck turned onto my road as the last car pulled out, and the deputy, a tired, decent-looking man my father's age, rolled down his window and asked if everything was all right. I told him it was now. He looked at the dust. The convoy was kicking up down the road, and he nodded slowly and he said, family. And I said family, and he made a sound that was almost a laugh. And he said, "You did the right thing calling early. Most folks wait till there's holes in the walls. By then it's a whole different mess." He told me to call back if anyone came around, and he left. And then I was alone, which is what I'd wanted, in the only home I'd ever owned, with the lake going dark in front of me and the steak in the fridge, and a quiet so total I could hear my own breathing slow down for what felt like the first time in years. The fallout came, the way it does. It always does, and anyone who's done what I did is bracing for it as they read this. So let me tell you how it went, because I think the how matters. My phone became a war zone. The family group chat I'd been muted in for years knit up with 40, 50, 60 messages, a flood of them, and I read maybe the first 10 before I understood the shape of the whole thing and stopped. Selfish, cold, heartless. Mum was devastated. The kids cried the whole way to the motel. Money changed you. We were going to have such a nice time. Look what you did to this family. My aunt, who I'd seen perhaps 4 times in my adult life, sent a paragraph about how my late grandmother would be ashamed. My brother sent a single line that just said I was dead to him, which, given that he'd been functionally dead to me for 10 years already, landed with less weight than he'd hoped. The old me would have answered every single one, would have explained, justified, apologised, negotiated, tried to make them understand, tried to be understood, which is the doomed and bottomless need that had run my whole life. I have spent thousands of hours of my one life trying to make people who benefit from misunderstanding me decide to finally understand me. You cannot win that. The understanding is not the thing they're withholding. The withholding is the thing. So I didn't answer the chat. I left it. 3 days later, I quietly left the group entirely. And the silence after that was not the silence of surrender, the way it had always been before. It was the silence of a door that's closed because the person on the other side of it likes it that way. My mother called. I did answer that once, because she's my mother, and there's a thread there I'm not ready to cut even now. She didn't apologise. She wept and asked how I could do this to her, and told me she'd raised me better, and asked, in the end, the question that told me everything, which was not, "Are you okay?" or "Why are you so upset?" but "What are the neighbours going to think?" And I understood, finally and completely, that I had never once been a daughter to her. I'd been a function, a thing that absorbed and smoothed and provided, and I just announced that the function was discontinued, and she was grieving the appliance, not the person. I told her I loved her, and I hoped someday we could have a real relationship between 2 people instead of a service contract, and that until then I wasn't available for this. And I hung up, and I cried. But I'll tell you the truth. I cried the way you cry when something's finally over, not the way you cry when something's being done to you. There's a difference. If you felt it, you know. Here is what no one tells you about the fallout, the part the comments never quite believe until they live it. Most of it is noise, and noise has no weight unless you pick it up. I kept expecting some real consequence, some hammer to fall, because my whole life I'd been taught that my no would cost me everything. And the bill never came. There was no hammer. There was just a few weeks of ugly messages I didn't read, a holiday I spent alone with a good book, and felt better than I had at any family holiday in 20 years. And then, slowly, a life. My life. The one I'd bought the house for. The lake froze that winter and I learned to walk out on it. Spring came and I planted things, badly, and some of them lived. I made friends in town. The escrow officer who told me it was my house turned into the kind of friend who has a key, which I gave her freely, because the point was never that no one could come in. The point was that I got to decide. I had a neighbour over for that steak dinner eventually, and then for a lot of dinners, and that's a different story. But it's a good one, and it started the night I learned to stand in a doorway. My sister and I have not spoken in 14 months. I used to think a sentence like that was a tragedy. Now I think it's just a fact, and facts are lighter than tragedies. She reached out once around the holidays. A single text that said, "Mum's not doing great, just so you know." No apology, no opening, just the old machinery. One more attempt to find a lever that used to work. I said back that I was sorry to hear it and that I hoped Mum felt better and that I was here for a real conversation whenever anyone wanted one. No one wanted one. No one wanted one. You're allowed to leave the door open and have no one walk through it, and you're allowed to stop standing there waiting. People ask me if I regret it. They ask it the way my sister threatened it. You'll regret this. Like regret is the toll booth at the end of every boundary, and I tell them the truth, which is that the only thing I regret is the 31 years I spent before that porch. I regret every time I made up a bed for someone who wouldn't have crossed the street for me. I regret the $400 and the slept on couches and the apologies I made for things that weren't mine to be sorry for. I regret being so afraid of one bad evening that I traded away 1,000 good mornings. I don't regret the porch. I'd do the porch again 100 times. The lake is silver again this afternoon, the way it was the day she called. I'm leaning a little to the left at the kitchen window so I can see it, and the wine's in the fridge, and the door is locked, and the locks are mine, and the quiet is the kind I chose instead of the kind I was assigned. If you're standing in your own life right now, waiting in a line you didn't ask to be in, holding a phone with someone's name on it that makes your chest go tight, I want you to know the line isn't real. You can step out of it. The cost is loud, and it is brief, and it is so much smaller than the cost of staying. And on the other side of it, there is a lake and a chair, and the sound of your own breathing slowing down at last. The night I stood on that porch, I finally understood something I've been running for my whole life. The people who treat your kindness as weakness will never be argued out of it. You can't out-explain them, because being misunderstood was never the problem. My sister didn't fail to understand me. She understood me perfectly. She just preferred the version of me that said yes. What changed everything wasn't anger. It was the hour I spent before they arrived, when I sat at my own table and made calls instead of beds. That hour was the whole story. Everyone in the comments on stories like mine always shouts the same thing. Call the police, lock the door, don't let them in. And they're right, but they say it like it's easy. Like the hard part is knowing what to do. It isn't. I always knew what to do. The hard part was believing I was allowed to do it. The hard part was deciding that the woman who'd worked 11 years for that lake was worth protecting from the people who shared her blood. I want to be honest about where the strength actually came from, because it didn't come from nowhere and it wasn't the personality I was born with. It came from doing one small right thing first, calling the deputy, getting on record, refusing to lie to myself about who these people were, and then standing behind that choice when the crying started. Doing the right thing gave me a place to put my feet. Thinking clearly, reading the deed instead of replaying old guilt, told me the right thing was even possible. And then it just took staying upright through 8 loud minutes when every cell in my body wanted to fold. That's all courage is. I've decided. It's not the absence of the tilt toward the floor, it's the 8 minutes of not falling. My mother asked what the neighbours would think, and that one question told me I'd never been a daughter to her. Only a function. And the moment I stopped performing the function, the relationship I thought I had simply evaporated, because there'd been nothing under it. That's cause and effect. You don't get to keep a bond that was only ever made of your own surrender. If you take anything from what happened to me, take this. The cost of holding your ground is loud and brief. The cost of giving it away is quiet, and it never ends. I spent 31 years paying the quiet bill because I was terrified of one noisy evening. The noisy evening came and it was over by morning, and on the other side of it was a lake, going silver, and a life that was finally mine. Decide what's yours, then be the kind of person who can stand in the doorway and mean it. The door doesn't have to stay shut forever. It just has to be a door that you control.